Brilliant. Today's webinar. So this week's webinar, Mastering Property, Limited Companies and Financing. Today is a webinar for the pros. This is how everybody's done it. It's two things put together, and when you stick them together, it makes the good into something that's really, really good.
Definitely.
We've got 4 points. We're going to talk to you today about the advantages of buying in a limited company, property investment. What are they? And it's a pretty dense one today. There's a lot of bullet points today. And we'll go through that. There's some key benefits, and it is how the majority of people are buying properties now in a limited company. So we'll talk about why and the benefits and do a deep dive on that. Strategies for optimizing financing to maximize the return. So if you stick limited company with financing together, it throws up a few challenges.
Sure.
But there's a bit of a myth busting, dispelled some myths there, because some of the challenges are reasonably easy to overcome. We'll figure that one out with you. Buy, rent, refinance is a strategy and how that fits in with limited company as well. Bit on bridging finance, lending generally. Then insider tips and tricks from seasoned experts in the field. And I guess is that you or me? It's got to be one of us.
Hope so.
And it's about the right house, the right area. And then we've got 8 tips to maximise your profits, which we're just going to touch on, because each one could be a webinar by itself, but we'll give you an overview of that. And then got a little case study at the end as well, including, there's a link to an interview after that as well, if you want.
There will be, for more. Yeah.
Dive straight in.
Loads of info there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Lauren, you keeping your eye on the waiting room? I think it says there's a couple of people.
Yeah.
Cool. Bro. There we
then.
go. All right. So if you're just joining us, you haven't missed anything. We're about to start now. Let's crack on.
The advantages. So, first things first. Roughly speaking, how many of your landlords do you think now? So, Adam, sourcing properties for clients. We're a letting agent. I think most people on there know we're a letting agent. We're also a property sourcer. So
it's fair to say that there might be some people.
There might be. We should probably in the housekeeping. We should probably do that. We're
just
a letting
to clarify,
agent.
we are a letting agent. We manage close to 1,000 properties, but we're quite unique in that we run a separate department within the business that I look after, and it's sourcing and renovation management, basically. We hold a client's hand through the sourcing of a deal. A HMO is single let, something that needs a full renovation, something that needs no renovation, a light renovation, a flat conversion, you name it. Whatever it is a client wants, pretty much within buy to let, being a landlord, we can source it. We schedule and manage a renovation, and then we manage the letting of it. At the same time, we introduce people to a mortgage broker, an accountant, a solicitor, a bookkeeper, a surveyor, anything you need, the full service. Yeah, we've got a bit of experience in this.
We should perhaps have started off with that. So when we're saying invest in limited company and financing, we're talking from a background of I'm personally a landlord, I invest inside a limited company.
We both,
Adam's a landlord, invests in a limited company. It's something that we do, and we also do it for clients as well. So there's a lot of experience there.
I've overseen more than 500 property purchases and renovations.
Get on with it. Now we're just bragging.
But in the last 5 to 6 years, the vast majority of all of those have been for landlords who have set up and bought inside a limited company.
Yeah, exactly. My point.
8 years ago, there were a lot more people doing it in their own name,
Correct.
but because of Section 24 tax, which is the first point, most people do it inside a limited.
My point there is, this is something that is very common. So if you come into this as this limited company thing, is it a new thing? Where you go with it? No, it's something that almost everybody is doing. Now, we're not tax experts, we're not accountants, we're not solicitors. We can't advise you. All I can tell you is what I do myself, what Adam does himself. We can tell you about himself, and what our clients do. And on balance, if you look at them, I would say it's high. 80-90% of landlords are buying in a personal name, particularly if they're starting out. If you've already got properties, and that might be, I would imagine by the time we get to questions,
even the clients who have got a handful in their own name are now doing all the new ones in
a limited company. Okay, we'll talk about that. So, right, what are the advantages? Why are people buying in a limited company? Because 10 years ago I wasn't. I was buying in my own name. So the main advantage, the thing that pushed people to do it, is Section 24 taxes. If you're not aware of that, Google it, it'll all come up. But essentially, as of 2000, and do you know the exact date?
I think it was
17?
something.
It came in over 4 years.
It's
so
a
actually
while
went
ago.
4 years, and then one financial year later than that,
Yeah.
it starts to bite. So it tapered in, and I think it was 2017. But essentially, you are now, as a landlord, if you own a property in your own personal name, there's no tax allowance anymore. You are effectively taxed on turnover. You can get yourself into the unfortunate position if you're mortgaged, not if you buy everything
In
cash, then maybe buying a limited company isn't for you. But although there are lots of other benefits as well.
Depends though, higher taxpayer,
Correct.
everything else.
So yeah, you are now taxed on turnover. There's no you get a 20% relief or 40% relief, higher rate, lower rate taxpayer. But essentially, it can be tough if you're mortgaged. You can be in the situation where you're taking rent, losing money, but still have a tax bill. So stick it inside a limited company, and that issue disappears because you're taxed like you're a limited company, and that is as you'd normally expect it. Ins, outs, income, expenditure. There's your profit. You pay your tax on it. So that is the main thing that's pushing people. There might be some questions later on about how that in the future could be reversed or talked about or changed. We'll come on to that. I don't believe it could be. Too many pension companies are buying a limited company.
Yeah.
Every business that owns a property in a limited company, and I don't think that's the plan. I think the plan is basically to weed out the small landlords, get them compliant, and most importantly, put their tax affairs on the radar of HMRC. Most,
Exactly.
it is most. It's something like 7. Nobody knows for sure, but I'm sure at HMRC you've got a good guess. Most landlords, small-time landlords, do not declare their income, and HMRC want that on the table. So anyway, I think that's a big reason to do it, go into a limited company. But then there's all sorts of other knock-on benefits that over the last decade since I've been buying in a limited company, I've come to know and understand, and I think even if there wasn't the Section 24 tax, I'd probably be buying inside a limited company as well. First one, it's got to be said, you're in a limited company, you're limiting the liability. Now, that's a small consideration in my mind because almost always you have to give a personal guarantee when you are taking out one of these properties. I'm absolutely
A mortgage,
fine.
you mean?
Sorry,
Taking out
when
a
you
mortgage
take out a
on.
mortgage in a limited company, yeah. I'm absolutely fine with that because it's I was fine in doing it in my personal name.
Exactly.
I've got to say, I've actually done a few now where I haven't had to give a personal guarantee.
Really?
Yeah, I've got to the stage now where I'm giving debentures on the company, and it's got to the point. So it gets to a point when you can give a corporate guarantee, and we're there now. But anyway, it is a consideration. Potentially, and I don't do this, although I don't have this kind of property. My accountant has said, I've got some clients now, and we can put you in touch with an accountant if you need an accountant to set up a property limited company, administer it, who buy maybe a block of flats or commercial property or something that's got some kind of maybe trading element, like a service accommodation block in a separate SPV, because you can limit and ring fence the liability of that block of flats. It was if in case it set on fire and you had an issue of good cladding and all those kind of things. We've got some clients that own a whole block of flats, it's clad, hive it off, and it doesn't affect any of the other properties if the worst happens. People are doing it that to potentially limit the liability. Here's the next thing. So it starts with a potential negative, and I'll flag it up. There's a potential, and it's always one of the downsides, issue about double taxation. You make your money inside the limited company, and then you've got to pay corporation tax on it, and then you pay money to get it out. And that's one of the big blocks for lots of people. It's like, well, why would I do this when there's that double membrane to take the tax out? Corporation tax versus personal tax corporation tax is historically better, but then there's lots of other things you can do. First thing is there's stuff you can do when you own your property inside a limited company, when you've got any limited company, to mitigate your tax liability. You'll bring your corporation tax down by putting other costs and attributing other expenses inside that limited company. And that's probably one of the biggest benefits. I'm going to talk about all of that, the ways you can mitigate those things in a complete separate, because there's about 6 or 7 other bullet points. But that's a way, double taxation, don't worry about that so much, but maybe you won't be paying so much tax because there's ways to mitigate it. Once you're inside a limited company, you can take dividends out, and dividend tax again is historically being, I mean, there's talk of levelling it up, hasn't happened yet, but it's a very good way to take money out of a property. Just if anybody's interested, taking circa £100,000 per person out at a very advantageous tax rate, that's about where you can get to very, very easily. So there's quite a lot of headroom in most property portfolios just to get to the point where, you know, husband and wife can live on it, you know. So it's, you know, the blended tax rate is definitely cheaper inside a limited company by the time you take in the minimum PAYE, perhaps some capital, but your free allowance, I know that's dropping, but also then your dividend tax and maybe some of the other things we're going to talk about as well. So yeah, it can definitely, your blended rate will be lower inside a limited company. Not giving you tax advice, can't give you any of this, but I know mine is, and you can look at the numbers and go, yeah, it makes perfect sense. This idea of double taxation disappears because, you know, there's other ways to do it. A really, really good point, and this is a good way to get money in and a good way to get money out of a limited company, is the idea that there's a group company structure.
Sure.
So you wouldn't want to have your properties held, I don't believe, not giving advice, in a limited company that's also a trading business. There's risk, your SIT code wouldn't sit right, your accountant probably shouldn't allow it.
You'd have lending issues.
All sorts of, yeah. So you keep them separate, which means that if you are a business owner and you own a business, or you're a contractor, just looking at the waiting room, Lauren, sorry, there's people there. Yeah. Okay. And you're making profits somewhere else, maybe 2 or 3 other businesses. If you have a head company and it can go up to the group company and then it can go down to the property company, you can transfer, all things being equal, take accounting advice, you can transfer profits within group companies without paying tax. So that's a really good way to move losses around, move profits around, and get them to the place where you want to.
We have clients
invest.
that do that.
Yeah. Contractors, maybe you don't consider yourself as a business owner, but you're self-employed, or you could be self-employed. Yeah, can you change that from employed status and put it inside a limited company, and then, you know, solicitors, accountants, those kind of things, people can do that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a big one. It's a good way to get money in. It's also a good way to get money out, or get it from the profit centre, the business, into properties. We're talking about the DLA, Director's Loan Account, at that point as well. Again, and that's the mechanism. If you have a pot of personal cash and you want to put it into the limited company, you can Director's Loan Account, loan it to the business, and that way you can put the money in and the money out, and then when you take it back out, it's not taxable because it was once on the tax paid side. So we're getting pretty heavy on tax. We're going to turn people off here. We'll go. I quite like a tax conversation, but yeah. But look, when you put all those things together, it's pretty stellar. It's pretty stellar. I mean,
of course.
It's like there's
a reason why most landlords are doing this.
This is one of the reasons why landlords get a lot of stick. I mean, it is tax advantageous. It just is. There's no two ways
Not
about
avoidance,
it.
though.
It's not. No, absolutely not. These are all not even. Not even avoiding it. This is just a different way to set business up.
Yeah.
Right. Look. So I said one of the sort of the issues about this double taxation is maybe not actually making quite as much money because there's other ways. And I said I'd talk in a separate section about mitigating your corporation tax, because there's a lot of things that you could claim. Now, I can't give you an exhaustive list. We can put you in touch with an accountant who would get out a list, a tick sheet. What about this? What about this? I mean, we are right now in my house, and this is my office, and a percentage of this office goes towards my property business. Legitimately, there's filing cabinets over there, and that desk over there, and 20% of my time in here, and the heat, light, power all goes towards that. It just does. You know, we're not making that up. A lot of your life, if you look at it, could go through a limited company. I mean, you might be pushing things if you had a board meeting in, you know,
the Caribbean.
A spa resort in the Caribbean. Yeah. But then again, you might not. Depending on the size of your business, you seriously might not. Yeah. If you have,
you might be genuinely looking to buy some property out there.
Yeah.
A holiday let.
I genuinely once went on a field trip to see if we were going to buy some houses in Porto. I've got some Portuguese friends, and Porto, I don't know if you know it, but it's gone through a massive regeneration over the last decade, 15 years. It's too late now, guys, it's done. and I was out there 20 years ago, and we did a trip to see what we could do. The whole thing was too complicated, but the whole trip,
It's a
it was a
business
very nice
research
trip.
trip, right?
It was expensive. And I asked the accountant, yeah, is that actually, yeah. We definitely did quite a lot of property tours. I also did quite a lot of port tours, but it's by the by, isn't it? So yeah, you'll find a lot of life can go through a limited company. Your car, if it was a van or a lorry or a truck, a pickup truck, stick it through the business. Electric cars, a company car, electric car now, your big benefit in kind rate is, I think it's 0 or 2%. Everybody's cars now, a company car. It's electric, so it all goes through, Here's two big ones coming up, and you might want to make a note of these. What about putting a pension through? So if you set up a pension, whatever type of pension, but probably a self-administered small scheme, a SAS pension, and we've got people on our power team who Adam would introduce a client to, because it's a big part of it's one of the big parts of the toolkit. Those pension contributions are tax deductible. So you're getting money out of the business, reducing the profits, sticking it into pension, using that for whatever, maybe even buying back some properties. It can only be 50%, it can only be back into a limited company, not residential directly. All those things that apply, can't give you any advice on it, but we know somebody who can give you some very good advice on it.
Really good.
So, that's there. And then here's a final one, which is, it's a really big deal, this, and I've seen lots of accountants get this wrong. And it needs an experienced property investor to actually show the average accountant how to do this. And we're talking about repairs versus capital. So when you're buying a property and you're going to do some renovation on it, some of that renovation will have to be capitalised. So if you put a new roof on and you're upgrading it, then that's probably capitalised if you build a new wall. But if you're repairing an existing roof, if you're changing some windows, if you're fitting a bathroom because the old one was in disrepair, that's a repair. And that will be set against your profit and loss. And generally speaking, if you do a pretty chunky renovation on the first
you
need
a good accountant. I've seen people complaining that they've had to pay a lot in tax, and I'm looking at it. I'm thinking you've got two houses or one house at the moment, and you've done it work on it. I don't understand. So it's really important to have a property accountant, not just your mate, a friend of a friend, someone who's good, someone who did your accountancy for some other stuff.
I've been in a room with a very big, expensive accountant, not top 4, but top 8, big accountant, because the people I was working with were a very big business owner. They'd sold their business, they got some money, and now they're investing in property, and the accountant used to run the accounts for the PLC. So they're not silly. And I said something, and at the time I was in my mid-20s, and you could just see this multi-millionaire property owner went, oh, and the solicitor went, no, you can't do that.
Right.
So the accountant, no, you can't do that. And I went, well, I think you can. Came back 2 weeks later, we'd saved him several £million. And this silly 20-year-old had just opened his mouth. So yeah, don't take that for granted. Repairs versus capital is a big thing. There's lots of technical rules about it. Read the HMRC guidance. Well, get your accountant to read the HMRC guidance. So, in terms of the advantage of utilising limited companies, I think that rounds out the advantages. Can you think of any other advantages? I mean, what else?
They're the main ones. They really are.
Yeah, and I know they're quite detailed. They're quite techy.
What about
taxi.
Inheritance?
Yeah, of course. As soon as you've got things in a wrapper, in a vehicle, inheritance tax planning becomes a lot easier with a limited company. Also, passing it on.
But I was thinking of more like passing it on. Just like you see, such and such and sons decorators, and the granddad started it 70 years ago, and now the grandson runs it. Yeah. It's the same.
There'll be a point when I've got 4 kids. They'll all become shareholders, directors. When it comes to things like loans, so I'll have taken out loans, and it will be I'm signing for the company. It's just as easy for any director to sign for the company, and later on that will happen. And my signature from 30 years ago is still valid as a company signature, and son, daughter's signature is valid now as a director. So exactly. It becomes very easy to slide things over. the 7-year rule that you may or may not be aware of with transferring assets and those kind of things. You can do that well ahead of time. Who wants to cut it? How long till I die? Is it 7 years? Who wants to cut it? Fine, you can do it well ahead of time, and that helps. You can do things like A and B shares and freezer shares and gaining in equity shares and all that kind of stuff. As soon as you put something in a limited company, all those options open up to you. So
yeah, most definitely.
I think to summarise it, it gets away from the very root problem, which is owning a limited company is not tax efficient. It opens up all these possibilities, and it's the way everybody's doing it.
Yeah.
So
Some strategies then.
strategies. So I was going to say at the end there's some pitfalls, but I think we covered those. Right. So the actual strategies for optimizing finances to maximize returns, and of course it goes without saying, inside using a limited company. So there are some things that are universal, whether you're in a limited company or not. But then there are some things that work well within a limited company, or we'll talk about how you do them specifically when you need to do them in a limited company. So the first thing, should we just talk about mortgages in general?
Yeah.
So not everybody wants a mortgage.
Nope.
That's worth pointing out.
Yeah, exactly. We have most of our landlords, our clients do. They either buy it with a mortgage to begin with if it's in a lettable condition, or if we're doing a full renovation on a rundown house, they'll buy it in cash and then put a mortgage on after they've owned it for 6 months. But we've got a handful of clients that don't. They're very cash rich and they just want it in property and not in a bank.
Yep.
But of course, yeah.
If we talk about strategies for optimizing financing to maximize your returns, a mortgage is a good idea.
Of course.
The sort of the classic example would be take a £100,000 house, because it works for percentages easily. If you put money into stocks and shares and the market moves 10%, you make £10,000. But you put £100,000 in because you didn't mortgage it, it's cash only. If you buy a property for £100,000, and let's say you put £20,000 into the property because that was the deposit, or maybe £25,000, and the market moves 10%, you've still made £10,000, but you've made £10,000 on 25 grand, not on £100,000. The returns, if you did it the other way around, if you made 10% on £25,000, it's £2.5 grand, whereas you can make £10,000 on the capital gain on the £100,000 house. It's night and day.
Totally.
Pretty soon we're going to start getting all the adverts for end of year SaaS, and put your money in, and there'll be an article in the Daily Mail or something like that, or the Express, saying what won last year, was it property or was it stocks and shares? And it always makes me laugh because there's not a lot in it usually, a couple of percentage points here and there, but they're talking cash on cash.
Yeah.
So the stock market was 10% higher than the property market, or 3% higher really. So I should put my money in stocks and shares. Well, I've got a mortgage on mine.
Exactly.
I'm at 40% equity, and the rest is borrowed money, and I made my capital gain on other people's money. It's night and day. It does raise the question. It'd be a topic for another webinar about risk mitigation and what happens when interest rates rise, because they have and they do, and all those things. So you've got to be comfortable with all the risk. You don't want to be over leveraged, definitely not. But having some form of leverage is definitely beneficial.
I think so.
Yeah.
And it takes us into the next point about costs. So limited company lending, a lot of people think it's very expensive in compared to your own name, and actually it's not these days. Right now, as the mortgage market is bouncing back, you might still see that some of the fees are quite high potentially.
That's the same for personal though as well.
Yeah, there's still there are, but the actual payable interest rate is negligible in a lot of cases. The difference is not. It might be a little bit more expensive, but it doesn't outweigh all the advantages we've already spoken about.
So that's personal versus limited company, virtually identical percentages, and I can tell you, for me, they're identical, because as soon as you go over a portfolio landlord and a bit more, If I got a personal name mortgage, it would be at the same rate.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
as you grow your portfolio, you're going to get used to having to spend more money on mortgages. It's not that much more, 0.25, something like that percent. Probably pay slightly less fees for the setup, not that
Sure.
much less, but so yeah.
There's a few other things on buying, sort of refinancing in a limited company or buying in a limited company. You will have to pay for some independent legal advice that the lender expects you, requests you to have. It's not a massive cost. I think you can do it. The last time I did it, 150, 60 quid, and it was all on Zoom. The solicitor's fees pretty much exactly the same.
Yep. Not
So
always, and it used
not always,
to.
and it
Used to
depends.
be. So, if you're buying a property with a mortgage, the mortgage company will usually, it's called dual representation, allow the solicitor, your solicitor, to represent you and the mortgage company. When limited companies mortgages came out, they used to not allow that. So you'd have to have a solicitor, and the limited company had a
And you'd pay for theirs.
and you paid for theirs. And some of it was genuinely that's the way they did it. Later on, I believe my feeling was it became, there's a way we can slide another £1,000 fee out because it's and they generally were crappy slow solicitors. As the market's become more regular to have a limited company mortgage, that's kind of disappeared. There's still one or two left,
Of course.
but an ILN, independent legal advice, that's quite common. If you see it, just get one done on Zoom. I mean, we do 150 quid. I can call the guy in the afternoon, and he'll still have it done by the end of the day.
Exactly. So, if you would like to be introduced to our mortgage broker, she works for me and Jess. Lots of our clients. I'll gladly put you in touch with Charlotte, her name, and her team, and they will set up a chat with you, Zoom or a telephone call, or if you're in the West Midlands where she is, maybe go and meet her. They won't charge you for initial consultation and chat and see how they can help you.
So something that we probably make light of, and because having all your ducks in a row, if we talk about these strategies, and this might come into one of the tips later on, but we make it easy, and I think sometimes when we speak to clients that have done it before, it is having that team. So you just mentioned Charlotte putting people in touch. It's not just Charlotte. So Charlotte is the mortgage broker, but think about how many times in situations the question has to go to the accountant and the solicitor.
True.
And she sits in the middle, or we introduce it. And because we deal with them all the time, there was an email not many weeks ago where Charlotte had Ali, my accountant, and Eleanor, the solicitor, all on the same round robin. And it got sorted out in 2 emails, and Ali went, yeah, here's the PDF of the deed of trust or whatever it was, and that's taken a long time to put together.
True.
And if you come up against that first as a newbie, not having bought in a limited company, that's tricky. So getting the right team, the deal team, the power team, whatever you want to call them, it's that trio of solicitor, accountant, and mortgage broker.
Yeah.
And they can tell you things that are true to their industry and right, but don't work. The accountant can, and they've done it with our clients, set up a limited company that's not mortgageable.
Yeah,
That's happened. That's happened quite a few times. You've got to be careful of the percentage ownership. Don't have a debenture from another company, perhaps. Percentage ownership, somebody owns over 25%, they're deemed as a person in control or significant person. If it's just 1%, it gets in the way sometimes. You've got a minority shareholder. Having a corporate director on some of these isn't right. Now, I couldn't give you a direct answer on any of those ones. It's lender specific, or it's the kind of thing where you need the solicitor on the phone to the mortgage broker to say yes, to then set up the limited company. And so you're putting all those people together. Like Adam says, if you want that kind of advice, we can't give it, but we can put you in touch with not just the single person, all 3 people together. Which
Something else we didn't quite touch on, but has been a struggle for a lot of people is if they've got a portfolio already in their own name and they want to incorporate that and move it into a limited company, there's barriers to that. There are ways of doing it. you typically need to have more than 8 houses to be able to move them into a limited company. If you would like some advice on moving your own properties into a limited company, I have an accountant I can introduce you to for that. Because there are quite, it's a process. It can take a few years. It can be quite costly if you do it wrong. The government are cracking down on people trying to have like a limited liability partnership now.
There's stuff in the news. If you Google 118 property, then there's all sorts of stuff about the wrong way to do it.
So if you'd like an introduction to an accountant who can talk to you and give you some sound advice about moving into a limited company, we can do that. Lauren will be sharing some links to book a call with me if you wanted to have a chat. If you click the link, you'll see my calendar. You'll be able to select a time that suits you. Please don't try and book in for today. It might say that I'm available, but there's an issue with it's open. But as soon as this call's finished, myself and Jess are going into our office because we're running a bit of staff training today. So if you do book a call with me for today, I will have to email you back and just ask you to look for a suitable time next week. But please feel free to book a call. I can chat to you about any of the stuff that we've talked about so far that we're going to continue talking about. So thanks for that.
Just on the bit you were talking about a second ago, which was, remind me,
moving into a limit from your own name.
Here's the trigger points. If your accountant or solicitor, whoever you're talking to, says when moving personal properties into a limited company, you are going to be liable for capital gains tax or stamp duty, that's the point when you need to pick up the phone to Adam. You might be, but you probably aren't. I managed to move them without it.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean that's the trigger point. That's the stumbling. People say, "Well, I've got to sell it from my name to."
And it's like most things. It's like most things. You will talk to one accountant, it'll tell you one thing, another one will say something else.
You Google it on the internet, you'll get 3 different opinions, and you'll speak to one accountant, 2 accountants. They'll say you can't do this, you can do this, whatever.
We'll make an introduction to someone if that's something that you want to speak about, because it's very complex and it's
I'm keeping on track here. Back to strategies for optimising financing to maximising return. And I think right now we need to talk about buying, refinance.
If you're talking about maximising,
BRRR. Come on, what does it stand for?
You need to buy,
refurbish,
rent, and then refinance. So
that's what we do. I always get it wrong.
A lot of people think, what do you mean refinance? Well, you've already financed it with cash. So your first mortgage is a refinance. It is the best way to stretch a pot of cash. You buy, and it means that you buy something, you renovate it because it needed that renovation. You've bought something that was run down. You've made it the nicest house on the street. Therefore, you've created added value straight away. Because no one's selling you a house below market value that's nice. You wouldn't, would you? So whenever anyone says to you about below market value, the likelihood is you're probably not going to get it below market value unless you're buying it rundown and you're creating the value.
The argument is, when you buy it, you've just paid market value. That is
the
market.
Exactly.
The market is a market of one. There's got to be a reason that somebody will give it to you below market value. It could be speed, it could be distress, it could be all sorts of things.
There is that.
You could get a really, really nice house, a bit cheaper, because they need to emigrate. It just doesn't happen very often. No, you might, it just doesn't. So, if you want to make a habit of buying properties like that, below market value or with a margin, you're not going to come across them very often that are just, here's a nice house, I will give it away with 20% margin. What Adam's saying is, they take work. You've got to dig them out and you've got to fix a problem. And it's usually a renovation. Buy, renovate, rent,
you've
refinance.
Bought it, you've renovated it, you've created and added the value. That then allows you to put a mortgage on the house and pull a large chunk of the capital you've spent back out, because the house is now worth more than what you paid for it, obviously. And you've created some value there. So you're not going to be able to get every penny back out, but a large chunk of your cash. I use the example, if you've spent 100 grand on a project, so you've bought a house for about 70k, you've spent some money on it, you've spent some fees. We charge a sourcing and renovation management fee, for example. If we're doing a full renovation, our fee is £6,000 for finding the house and managing the renovation. So plus VAT. You will spend about, let's say, 100k all in. The house will be worth about 115, 120. On typical numbers, you're going to pull back out 87, 90k of your original 100 grand investment.
Yeah.
For example, you're leaving a bit tied up, but if you'd have gone and found a house on the same street and bought it with a mortgage deposit for 115 or 120 grand, you're going to have a mortgage deposit plus the same kind of legal fees, a larger stamp duty, a smaller sourcing fee. We could source you a house like that if that's what you want. Our fee would be half. We wouldn't charge you 6 plus VAT. It'd be 3,000 plus VAT. But you've created no value. You've spent way more, really, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. So the in is it's between 4 and 5 times.
You're going to be what, 40, whatever it is.
You'll still have a contingency because there's
you'll still need to put a couple of grand aside because you're buying a house from somebody
100%.
who's been living in it or has renovated it, and you'll find there's some issues somewhere. Yeah. It's safe and steady, and you're going to get the capital growth still. But the money you've just spent on your mortgage deposit and everything else, you might be into it for 30 odd K. That there is tied up for, that 30 grand is tied up for 2 years, maybe 5, depending on what mortgage you've taken out. Yeah. The buy in cash, refurbish, refinance, you've got most of your money back out within a year of buying the house.
Cool.
And therefore you can move on to your next one.
It works.
It does work.
I'll put 6 minutes for that. That's going to be in brief. We've got a case study later on, which is Paul's case study, and I think we'll run through that and actually show you in detail how it works. But
like I said before, book a call with me and I can talk to you about it in more detail.
Yep.
Please don't book for today, even if there is an option to, because I'm not going to be able to. I'm not going to be there to talk to you. I'm going to be driving to the office, then I'm going to be in the office. But no, we've done that process hundreds of times.
Hundreds of times. In fact, I've never bought a house where I haven't done that. That's how.
That's for you.
Personally.
Yeah. For clients we have.
Some clients, some clients just go, look, do you know what? Buy me a vanilla box once a year. I've got to buy a deposit. And it's cheaper. Now, here's the advantage of buying a vanilla box for £100,000. Your in is just a deposit.
Exactly.
When I say it's cheaper, that's the wrong way to do it. It's less capital intensive. In order to buy the house that Adam's talking about, you've got to buy the whole house in cash initially, probably.
And that's because
it's unmortgageable.
It's unmortgageable because it's run down. So a buy-to-let mortgage deems that the house has to be lettable when they lend you the money.
Correct. And you've also then got to pay for the renovation in cash. You can't get a mortgage for the renovation. Now,
but you can get some other types of finance. Yeah, should we talk about
that? Brings
us
neatly on to bridging finance and other types of finance.
Bridging and maybe renovation finance.
Renovation finance. Yeah. So none of these are specifically about limited company. You can still do this in or outside of a limited company, but this is about maximising the financial strategy. We've got links to lots of lenders who can lend outside of normal criteria, bridging, so that you can buy a rundown house, maybe financing for the renovation, so that you can buy the kind of houses, buy, refurbish, rent and refinances, which you wouldn't otherwise be able to buy if you haven't got the amount of cash. Yeah. So it's worth knowing that they're expensive. You've got to point that out.
Definitely.
I don't use them. I buy in cash. So I would say roughly every £100,000 I've got is a pot for me. So sometimes it's £125,000, sometimes it's £80,000, which means that roughly it's 100 grand. Because the kind of houses we buy, almost all of them are under £125,000 purchase price, almost all. That's where the good yield is. And we're talking about where the yields are at the moment. And we spend a bit of money on them, and they end up being worth anywhere between 80 and 125, 150. Obviously, if we spent 125, they get worth 150, 160. Yeah. But the idea that you can get bridging finance for those, rather than saving up the whole £100,000, it's going to help a little bit. It can top up a bit. Again,
it might be your only way of doing it because it's a means to an end.
Exactly. And that the point when it's expensive and you think, oh, that's expensive. If it's a choice between I can do it with it, even though I'm paying my fees, and it's expensive, or I can't do it, you should do it because it's the gain of buying the house, getting it done, and getting it turned around, sticking it in the portfolio, and then watching the thing go up in value. Right. I think we've done that. Strategy for optimising. Yeah. On to the next one. Okay. So next we said there's four things. We're a quarter of the way through. We're looking all right time-wise. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Insider tips and tricks from seasoned experts in the field.
Yeah. That is us. So we've got a team of property sourcers. They can accurately cost and manage a renovation, and I sit down with clients and I ascertain what it is they're looking for, and we take a buy-to-let order from our client and we go and source the house they've asked us to find them in the areas where we operate. So yeah, you've got here right area, the right street in that area, the right house on that street, and pay the right price for it. You should right a lot of times here.
Yeah.
Right condition,
Get it
right
right.
tenant, and right long-term management.
Yeah, let's do it right.
Yeah.
So there's things, ducks you need to get in the row. This is to maximise the financial gain or financial, just maximise the whole operation. Why wouldn't you maximise all these things? I don't think there's any big gain to come out of any of them, but when you stick them all together, 2% here, and all of a sudden you've got 20% gain. That's where it is. When Adam's talking about, you know, this thing that's on the shelf, the house I can buy and I can just buy it and I can negotiate and there's 20%. You can't. You've got to pick your right region, the right area, the right street, the right house on the street, and you've got to get the local knowledge. And you might have a 1% gain in all of those things versus any other property investor. If you then buy it for the right price, you get 5% off the price. You get it to the right condition. So what we're talking about there is buy, refurbish, rent refinance. This is the refurbish bit. You've got the right list of works. So these are all the things I need to do, and I'm going to get it for the right price. So I'm not doing too much, otherwise I'll be spending too much. And I'm not paying too much for the things that I'm doing, otherwise you'll be spending too much.
That's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's probably 5% in each of those. Then you put the right tenant in it, and they pay the right amount of rent, and they keep paying it, so you don't have voids, bad debts, maintenance, and all those things. Then you've got the right long-term management. So the letting agency you use, don't try and do it yourself. You'll lose more than the letting agency will save you. They'll look after the compliance, all the things that can be a hand grenade that can just lose, you know, the licensing. I had a landlord bought a house recently, didn't know there was going to need to be a license, and got all his, can't kick the tenant out, and he's got a rent repayment order. They're becoming very common now. So do all those things right, and you end up with the best return. It sounds obvious, but there's a lot of ducks to get in a row there to make it all work. Make sure you do, and if you need any advice on that, be in touch. But it's not, there's a difference between simple and easy.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds simple. Do this right, do this right, do this right. But it's not easy because there's a lot of things, lot of things to consider. And it's easy to lose any of the gains that you've made by making, you know, one mistake out of that list of rights, that string of rights. Brings us on to, we have this, and you feel free, write them down. 8 ways to maximise profits. Actually, before I go on to this, talking about right area, right street, right, all those right things and the property there, it's worth noting, and this is when we talk about 8 ways to maximise profits, this is the reason we talk about this first. Your capital gain is your biggest gain. So if you've got the right house, that's why we're talking about this. So we'll talk about the 8 ways to maximise profits, the P&L, the day-to-day, the rent in, the outs, and the profit at the end of the month. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we talk about that, we'll talk about the biggest gain. The biggest gain is the capital gain. If you've chosen the right area of the country, region, the right area in that region, and then the right street in that town, city, the right house on the street, and maybe it's regenerating, gentrifying in the area, the region is de-Londonification, it's levelling up, whatever. So that area's coming up, the region's coming up, that street in the town is an up-and-coming area, street, suburb, and then you pick the worst house on that street and then you make some value. You can see how every single one of those steps is giving you a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and you might end up 10% ahead of the average investor if you do all those things. Then once you've got that right house, if you pick the right area, it will go up in value over time. And here's the thing that you'd want to write down, and you know, feel free to get a book on a call and test your understanding of it. Every house that I've ever bought, and I've got data going back for nearly 20 years now, the capital gain has made me more than the rent. And that's worth knowing. So people get fixated on the profit and loss. Oh, but I'm making £350 on some of my properties every single month in rent. Some of them are making £700 or £800 in capital growth. And the interesting thing, or the the obvious thing, I suppose, is you don't see it, you don't notice it. There is no cash flow machine strapped to your house saying, here's the capital growth coming out. There's no bank statement coming out. I get a P&L account every month. Every property is making this money. Great. Don't get that for capital growth. You have to check it yourself. You have to check in. I do it every time I refinance. So every time I refinance a property, I've now got a datum point. That is the valuation now. I go back to the date then I bought it, forget all of the data, the price I paid for it, what it's worth now, go all the way back. What's the number divided by the number of months, divided by 6 years, divided by 12, whatever. It's always more. So that's really, really important. The reason you're getting involved in this is capital growth, and you need to keep remembering that. Otherwise, you get landlords saying, "This isn't worth it. I'm only making two or £3,000 a year. This isn't worth it." So you've just spent £6,000, £10,000, £15,000 this year in capital growth.
And it is really important because it helps you when you're refinancing again in a few years' time. It helps if you're going to pass that on.
Yep.
I had a client this week was refinancing a house.
You can sell it if you want. I will never sell it. But
Well,
you could.
Yeah. Client refinancing a house this week asked me to do a comparable on what it's worth now, and when I told him, he said, now I wish I'd bought every house on the street. But he perhaps hadn't been thinking about his capital growth at all until the refinance came up, and that's when it
the amount of landlords that we have.
He actually owns one next door to you, funnily enough, in Nottingham. Yeah.
Oh, which one?
Haddon. Yeah. But there you go. That was his. He's like, wow.
Hadn't noticed. The amount of landlords that we've got, and you can take the benefit of this knowledge, that have been our landlord for a decade, and they were very interested in their buy-to-let portfolio 8 years ago. They bought it. There was a lot of excitement. They refinanced it, and it's been bringing in great money all the time. And they've just sort of left it sat there. And when they come to and dropped off the end of a tracker rate, weren't paying attention. We've got loads of clients, so you wouldn't have been in touch pestering anybody.
Yeah.
So left to their own devices in some ways, and then when you check in, it's like, it's worth how much, and it's significantly more than they thought it could be, and then you get I wish I bought more houses. Take advantage of that. Right. So capital growth, just the 8 ways to maximise profits, and there are 8 ways, and we've got to be brief, but if you and I do this, I've got property manager in our office, and I run through these with him, and then the mortgage broker. And these are the things. These are the big levers in this order. Voids, avoid the void. Bad debts, chase down your arrears. Get very few bad debts. Maintenance, control your maintenance expenditure. It sounds really easy. I mean, how on earth do you stop that? Stitching time saves 9. You might have heard that. That was one of my grandma's sayings. Little and often maintenance. Do challenge the cost of works. Our property managers, powerful for us, does a value for money test on. We're doing loads of leaky taps, so we know that the leaky tap costs X.
True.
So but it's very easy to overspend. When we get a new contractor on board, you can see, when we don't get them on board, they quote and they're too expensive. You can pay double for the same cost. Similarly, when we get a new contractor on board, over time, they might start putting their price up. It just happens. So you've got to keep on top of that. So voids, bad debts, maintenance. The next thing is compliance, and this is the silent killer. You get something wrong and a hand grenade lobs in 2 years later, and it's a cost. So ways to maximise profit, void, bad debts, they're all maintenance reducing. That's all making sure that money's in, but it's this non-compliance that will suck money back out. A £4,500 fine for X, Y, and Z because you didn't tick a box somewhere or do something really, really hurts. And when you look at your profit and loss at the end of a year, it's more significant than saving a couple of quid on a drippy tap or knocking your letting agency down by 1% or whatever it is. It's that kind of stuff, and it's the kind of thing where you got the "it'll never happen to me" syndrome. It'll never happen to me, but it really will these days. Rent repayment orders, council fines, they're like traffic wardens, and they won't not give you the ticket. That's the interesting thing. You sit down and try and be reasonable, and it wasn't our fault, and it really nobody hurt, and we were only out of date by 3 weeks, and they wouldn't let us in, and whatever the mitigating circumstances, and they're writing it all down. Yeah, absolutely right. Well, there's your fine. But you didn't listen. No. I'm fining you. That's just because they can and they will and they'll. So, and Worst case scenario, it can stop you getting possession back. You have to pay the tenant back all the rent they've ever had. You can get fines up to so many percentages, 3 times the rent. Well, the absolute worst case, you can send you to prison. I mean, I don't know anybody who has, but some people have. It doesn't have. Apparently, it happens a couple of times a week. A landlord gets a criminal. It's not prison. It's a criminal record and it's a suspended sentence. But a couple of times a week, a landlord gets a criminal conviction. Don't be one of those. I think I'd hope everybody on the screen there isn't going to go anywhere that close to the edge of the law. But sometimes you can just do it without ignorance.
True.
So voids, bad debts, maintenance, compliance. The next one is rent level.
Yep. Nearly every self-managing landlord has houses that are below that, the current market rent level.
Put a percentage on it. Put a percentage. When was the last
95%.
time? When was the last time you met one that didn't?
The last time I met one that didn't was he did and he didn't.
Go on.
And this is he had a portfolio. Quite a few of them were at the market level. A couple weren't.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I've never really. I don't think I've ever met someone who wasn't below market level.
Private landlords, DIY landlords are consistently under-renting their properties. They're scared of having the conversation with their tenants to bring it up to market rent.
Yeah.
If you're not on market rent, you're not going to maximise your profit. And it's not about ripping off the tenant or being a money-grabbing landlord. It's only fair on the... It's only fair on the tenant...
This is a video.
Go on.
It's only fair on the tenant to increase their rent. That's a video topic.
Which I know.
Lauren?
It's only fair on the tenant to increase their rent. Go on, Lauren. That's a video topic. It sounds a little bit. Of course, a landlord would say that, and of course we would. We're in it for money, but we're not a charity. We can't be. The landlord, and I see this, the DIY private landlord who hasn't put their rent up is because they're not bothered. They're not in the game. It's not that they're not bothered. They're not considering it. They're not running it professionally. They're also then thinking, well, I haven't got the money to look after the maintenance or the repairs or maintenance.
Exactly.
I don't want to do this. I haven't got the money to pay a letting agency to look after the compliance. They're running an economy business that's on a downward spiral and things just go wrong. Your plumber, electrician, the guy that paints it on a tenant turn or does they are all going to put their rates up, and they have done. If when the boiler bill comes through, it is double what it was 4 years ago, and you haven't put your rent up, you can't afford it. And you might be thinking, oh, I'll go around there myself and flick the gas on myself and take that. I've seen it.
Yeah.
The sticker that goes over a gas appliance, condemned. Can't switch on. I've seen that. I'll take it. Still works, but it's not right. And that's the kind of trouble you can get yourself in if you don't put the rent to the market level. And it's fair on the tenant. You've then got to, and this is why it's fair, you've then got to make sure you are providing a decent, safe home and the right product. It's not about ripping the tenant off for all the best. It's about, you might put the rent up and use all that money to keep the property safe, secure, pay an agent to do a well-managed job. But that's what you should be doing.
The tenants
should be that good.
anyway.
Yeah, tenants expect it, absolutely.
Seen the time, we're going to have to...
Next one is mortgages. Get a mortgage review, bring your mortgage costs down. Seventh one is tax. Pay the right tax level. Hopefully we've covered that off on setting up a limited company. You'll have had a good conversation with an accountant and it will all be set up the right way. And the final way, the eighth way to maximise your profits is once you've got all those things in order, voids, bad debts, maintenance, compliance, your rent level, your mortgage, set to the right level, optimised, and you're paying the right amount of tax, the next thing is to buy another property. It's your biggest lever. Once you've got everything all running...
Guess who can help you do that?
Oh, yeah. But it's absolutely true, the amount of landlords who are looking at, this is a good game, I like this. Buy another one and buy another one. And we know buying a house is hard work. That's why we run a property sourcing service. I personally could not be bothered to go out there anymore, wear out my shoe leather and meet loads of estate agents, put loads of offers. It's a pain in the arse.
Yeah,
I don't want to do that. So it takes a long time to build a property portfolio, employ a property source so they can do it on autopilot. That's my best advice. I own a property sourcing company. You'd say I'd say that, but I own a property sourcing company so that somebody can do.
You're also the biggest client, though.
I'm definitely biased, but I'm also the biggest client. I want it automatic. I don't want to have to do that. Not only, I'm not lazy. I'm getting lazier.
You're efficient.
I know that I couldn't do it. I want to do other things. It's not just that. It takes a lot of time. It's not being lazy. Final thing then, time-wise, we've got some Q&A as well, is case studies. Have you got a link you can stick in to save us a bit of... brilliant. That's brilliant. So talk about Paul.
Client of ours, last few years.
You'll meet Paul if you click on the link.
Yeah, he's done an interview actually. He's bought 2 houses with us. He set up a limited company in order to buy the houses in that company. He bought his first one in the the northwest for 47.5 grand. We managed a renovation on it for him, just under 14. It's now worth 80 or 85k. I think back then it was 2020, 2021. Mortgages were a bit up and down, valuations where it took about a year to settle at that valuation. He's renting it for 700 quid a month. He's getting good cash flow. And he's refinancing that has allowed him to buy the second one with us, close to South Yorkshire. Don't just take my words. Follow the link in the chat to the video on our YouTube channel where you can see an interview with Paul. It's all there. Again, please feel free to book a call with me by following the link, but please remember I won't be available this afternoon, even if
You're paranoid,
it looks
aren't
like...
you?
I don't want to let anyone down.
He's messed up. He's not set his diary right.
I haven't set my diary right, but I don't want to let you down. Right, scroll to the top then. Let's have a look
So we've got Q&A,
questions.
and we're nearly at the end, but we'll stay until, if anybody wants, obviously we're nearly at the end. Thank you very much for your watching, and all the links will be on for one-to-ones and what, but we'll stay to the end of this Q&A. And if anybody has any other Q&A,
if you want an introduction to any of the people I mentioned in the wider team, mortgage brokers, accountants, etc.,
Can you read that?
You need to book a call with me, and I can do that. I can read that.
I can't read that.
Okay.
I've recently had my iPhone set to the big buttons, the big text.
No.
Yeah.
You there? Right.
I am.
Within a limited company, is it possible to claim depreciation of elements within properties, e.g. kitchens, bathrooms, notwithstanding the fact that the property overall will most likely be appreciating in value? That's a good question.
That is That is a very good question.
We always say that there's no question we've never answered before, but I've never been asked that.
Nobody ever asked that.
That's a good question.
And
do you know?
It's one of those things that you think, I used to know that. Now, the answer is, it depends, and you need to go speak to an accountant. It's the kind of question where it's neither here nor there, because if I tell you it, you can't listen to what I say anyway. You need to ask your accountant. I believe there's rules about commercial properties, and some people spent a long time trying to figure out that the communal areas of HMO were commercial and whatnot. You've got to speak to an accountant and test them on all these things, and you claim what you can claim. I know that there's a question around that people were trying, and it was overturned, and I think reasonably recently, within the last couple of years.
I can introduce you to an accountant who can get you
that's a clever way of saying that.
Professional opinion.
It's a question that's been asked before in my and I know in terms of my own tax affairs and accounting affairs, that is something we've considered. Okay. I believe it's something that we don't do.
Fine. There we go. Thanks for that one, Sean. John, hi John. Can you claim VAT back for expenses in a property company?
That's quite an easy one to answer. You could if you were VAT registered, but you almost certainly do not want to be VAT registered in a residential property portfolio. You don't have to be if you go over the threshold. That's the property is exempt. You can choose to be.
You'd have to put VAT on your rent.
Correct, that's the main reason. The residential property market would not stand VAT. Well, that's not true, of course it would. You couldn't put rent on top because the end user, the tenant, can't claim the VAT back. So your £1,000 rent would become £1,200. It actually wouldn't. You'd have to take £833 and pay the VAT.
Yeah.
So you do not want to be VAT registered. If you go over the £90,000 limit, you don't have to be VAT registered. They don't make you because property is exempt. If you wanted to be, you could choose to be. And you'll find that commercial property owners often are VAT registered because their end user is VAT registered. They can claim it back and it makes no difference. So the answer is you could, but you almost certainly don't want to in a residential property portfolio.
Good stuff. Okay, another question there. If you're doing a mixture of flipping, holding, would you need a holding company for the asset, a trading company for the management of the properties, an SPV for the flipping? Oof.
Yes, probably.
Okay.
Speak to the your accountant. Holding is definitely different to trading. Trading company for the management and SPV for the flipping. Which company would you buy the property if you don't know the end project? Probably the flip and move it actually, but again, take your accountant's advice.
Yeah,
you'd put it in a group and
definitely.
you can move it.
Yeah, that's one for an accountant.
That's one for the accountant, but there's good reasons for separating out, and there's definitely that's something to be considered. Cool. You're on the right track. Speak to an accountant.
Next question is: when buying a property through a newly formed limited company that doesn't have a trading history or accounts, etc., can that reduce the number of lenders that will be prepared to lend? Pretty much no.
No, they're assessing you as well.
They assess you as well. You can create a limited company today, apply for a mortgage in it tomorrow. You'll be signing a personal guarantee. No, most likely not.
You can mention that a first-time investor has got a slightly limited pool of lenders, particularly with HMOs, but that's not related to limited companies.
No. Yeah, you'll still have plenty of lenders available to you if you're a new limited company. Are you going to deal with the issues and problems of incorporating a private portfolio? Yeah, I think I mentioned that. We can put you in touch with an accountant who can give you some really good advice if you were looking to incorporate a private portfolio.
Yeah. Should we talk about that just for a little bit longer? Because if you're being told by somebody that you need to pay, and you're saying there the 3% surcharge, you're talking about SDLT, stamp duty, and capital gains tax. You don't. Really, really simply, in a nutshell, and you need to speak to professional advice, and we can put you in touch. And the best way that I can describe this is relate it to completely non-property stuff, and then it doesn't seem like it's a weird little scheme, because it's not. And there are people that have made weird little schemes out of it. Never ever get involved in a weird little scheme. It needs an HMRC scheme number. They call it a scheme number, and then it's approved. It's like, this is okay to do. Don't be putting hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds worth of assets through a thing that you do not know. It just doesn't seem sensible. Be 100% certain that it's okay. Reputable solicitor, HMRC scheme number. But I used to run another business, a trading business. We had shops. And if you imagine, as a teenager, I started it when I was in my teens. I was a sole trader, and I signed leases. I got loans out. We bought bought a van, whatever. So all my signatures personal. A couple of years later, we were a partnership, and about 5 or 6 years later, we were a limited company. And my signature was still over here personally, and then later on it was a partnership, and later on it was a limited company. But the limited company was still the same business, and the limited company still owned the benefit of this lease and the van there and all those things. That's what you're doing with a trading portfolio. It's got to be trading, it's got to be a business. And that's why Adam said earlier on, it's about 8 properties. Case law has shown that that is a business. 1, 2, 3 is a investment. So if it's a business, you're spending time on it, and there's a threshold, then you can partnership. Usually 3 years is the watershed moment, and then you can incorporate. It does throw up some other challenges, but sorry, when you do those things, you're not selling it. There's no capital gains, there's no stamp duty. In actual fact, it resets the capital gains. The day you incorporate, you would have a valuation done on the portfolio, and the existing properties would sit at a new book value because you've had a RICS survey done on the value. If you bought the house at 50 grand, it's now worth 250. The day you incorporate, it sits on your books at 250. If you sell at £250,000 the very next day, maybe not the next day, maybe you need to, that would show that you've done it on purpose. Yeah. But as long as it's genuine, and if it was genuine the next day, it's genuine, isn't it? Then there's no capital gains to pay, even though you bought it at 50 grand. So there's some very, very good reasons for doing it if that was... Anyway, that's I've done it with every single one of my properties. And,
there we go.
It works. It's
okay.
Good
next one is, can I have the contact details for your accountant, mortgage broker, solicitor? Yes, you can. Just book a call with me. I'll be able to introduce you to them. My question is the same as from Peter. For those of us who have personal portfolios from the old days and also have some bought some more recently via a limited company. So yeah, hopefully then that's
Hopefully
been
that's done it,
answered that. And that was the last question.
Cool.
As I said before, feel free to book a call with me. I'm not available today, but anytime next week that's on there, feel free to book in and I'd happily chat with anyone.
Amazing.
All right.
Well,
Thank you
have a great
everybody
afternoon,
for
everyone.
staying with us and hope it was useful. Need to ask for a 5-star review.
where's the little
Never
thing?
mind.
Go on Google, give us a 5-star review. We meant to have a QR code that pops up.
Yeah, we
Sorry,
don't
Lauren,
prep
really.
these things. We were thinking too much about the content, not the
That's it.
not the promo.
All my bullet points.
There you go. All right, cool.
Yeah, if you enjoy the webinar, if you go on the website, onto Google for the Landlords, we'd appreciate a 5-star review. That'd be nice. Thank you very much.
All right.
Oh, look. Thanks, Lauren. You've got a link. There you go. Click on the link. Give us a Google review. Cool. Appreciate it.
All right.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Ta-ta for now. Have a nice weekend.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.